and David Willard, EDC Funding Task Force members. Thank you, gentlemen, and you're on.
Okay, hi, everyone. I'm Chuck Hoffman. It's been a long time since I've been up there in that building. Probably the early 90s was the last time. I don't know if anybody there knows who I am, but I was, I guess, the lead consultant for the rewrite of the management plan. I came on, hired by the Conference of Upper Delaware Townships in the spring of 1984. And I was there until sometime in 1993. So we went through the rewrite of the plan, the public hearings, the waiting period for congressional approval. And I was there to help set up the council and get it going. For better or for worse, I'm the guy that thought up the structure that you guys operate in, a nonprofit organization whose members are all governments. It was the only way we could get the state of New York into it. It was easy for Park Service, the DRBC. It was easy for the Commonwealth of PA and the towns and townships, but New York State was a bear. That's why you are like you are, and you're not another federal commission. Probably people feel the same way now as they did then, that nobody wanted another federal entity wandering around the upper Delaware. So we set up this nonprofit organization in a way to bring everybody together and have an opportunity to talk out the differences and not have a repeat of the discord that ran through that area for years. Now, I know there was still discord after we got this set up, but 37 years later, I think you could say that you've done your job on that front. You've kept the peace, which was the first thing that people were thinking of. And then you've brought most of the towns into substantial conformance. People play by the plan. There's a lot to be said for that. What not enough to be said for is that you've gotten yourself into a present and future funding shortfall. I had not been involved with the council for many years. You know, I had my business to run and, you know, family to dress just like everybody else. But I started getting curious a few years ago, and I started to make phone calls to Laurie just to find out what was up. And I came to find out a year or two ago that your budget from National Park Service was still the same. And that neither state had kicked in. And I know that back in the beginning, the council members were not interested in really going out and doing fundraising from the public via foundations or grants or donations or the other ways that so many nonprofit organizations in this country meet their budget. But times have changed some. And you're facing this challenge. And my ego's involved here because I put a lot into this plan and I don't want to see you come up short. So I'm thinking, what can I do about it? And as I did when I got involved with my first nonprofit organization back in the 70s to stop a dam on the Red River in Kentucky and create what became a future National Wild and Scenic River. I said, let's start a group. Now, we weren't going to create another Upper Delaware Council, but knowing that you as key people in your communities, you likely didn't have the expertise on board to find ways to generate additional funds. So I suggested that you create what I called a fundraising task force, which would be a way to recruit in as volunteers people from outside the direct membership of the organization who had expertise in this area, who were interested in the Upper Delaware, and who might be able to contribute some of their time. We've done that. Marvin Rappaport, who was Matt McHugh's aide back when the river was designated in 1978, became a member. A couple of your own members, Al Henry and Bill Dudko, became members. I was a member. Molly Oliver from Friends of the Upper Delaware became a member. Adam Shellhammer from American Rivers became a member. And then I asked a person who actually worked for my consulting firm back when we were still doing the Upper Delaware, and who over the years has been a friend, a colleague, and later a client when he was the executive director of American Hiking Society, and my firm was handling their IT needs. His name is David Lillard. I asked him if he could sit in on a couple of meetings and give us advice. I asked David specifically because I knew he had background and years of experience, and he was a lot more successful fundraiser than I ever was. And we needed somebody with that direct expertise and up-to-date look at things, who knew how the fundraising world works at this point, knows the legalities, knows the specifics, knows the accepted protocols. And he agreed to sit in. And that, I think, was important for us. In the meetings that we've had, Laurie gave us a really excellent rundown on what your state of funding has been over the last few years, and what your current outlook is, about the difficult time you've had getting cooperative agreement monies from New York or Pennsylvania, that you've had a smattering of other financial support here and there, but that was never really enough to be the kind of thing that would sustain an organization. So we all sat around the table and we kicked around ideas. I put together a short paper on things you might do that I think more than anything entailed changing the way the organization does business in some ways. But then David came along the next month with a better idea. And one thing I learned on the Upper Delaware when I was leading those operations committee, the management structure planning, was that if somebody had a better idea than what I was throwing out there, was to go for it. And I believe David has a better idea. And I think that takes us to where we begin to turn things over to David. I can tell you that the I was running a firm called Hoffman Williams Laffin and Fletcher for the last 3 or 4 years of our participation on the Upper Delaware. David was I believe, our first professional hire. And we hired him first and foremost because he's an excellent communicator. He can speak, he can write. He gets to the point much better than I ever did. And and he bailed us out of one particular sticky wicket that I don't want to ever go into again. After that, he moved on to bigger and better things, and I should let him tell you about it and let him tell us what he's proposing. Take
Thanks,
it
Joe.
away.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all. How's my volume? Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, good. I grew up in a family of 7 kids, so I'm accustomed to shouting. I'm calling in from the Potomac River Basin, about 4 miles downriver from Shepherdstown. And I see we have a River Basin Commission person on the call. I work a fair amount with the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin. Really great folks. I grew up on the Delaware, far downstream, right outside of Newcastle, Delaware. So paddling on the big water there and fishing were a part of my life. As Chuck mentioned, did some work in the Delaware Estuary Program. I have limited experience in the upper Delaware, but I've been up where you can all practically jump across it, which is beautiful up there. So happy to be with you. My background, I work with a group called the Downstream Project. We're a nonprofit organization that helps other nonprofits and public agencies with communications, technology, fundraising plans, communication planning. My area of practice is to help create plans and sometimes to help implement them, like writing op-eds for leaders in the community to have submitted, and the communications output. I also wear a hat managing a land trust in Maryland, and we've been, I would say 5 years ago when I started, we had a budget of under $100,000. It's several million. It's not because I'm really smart. It's because if you're doing something good, you have to find out who cares about it and who's going to fund it. There's an old expression that fundraising is 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration. I'm going to pause right there to let you know that I had dental work done today. So if I start slurring, the medication is still wearing off. I just noticed that. So we were all pretty much raising money since we were little kids. We would say, "Hey, Dad, can I have $1? Hey, Mom, can I have $1.50?" We became fundraisers when one of them asked, "What are you going to do with that dollar?" And that's really the essence, right? What are we going to do with that dollar? And looking at all the stuff y'all are doing, they're just, you've got this river, you've got yourselves, you've got the UDC, you've got programs. I mean, if this is something that the council wants to do, and that's not for me to say, obviously, I'm sitting in on a few meetings, I think the prospects are good. I mean, fundraising right now is difficult at the federal level, of course, and it's trickling down to the states. And philanthropy is going to some of those voids that are being created in things like people eating right now. But this is a long term. The future is a very long time. So what I'm going to walk us through is what I call a facilitated plan. You can hire a fundraising consultant, and I've done these, and they do most of the work, and it's a lot more expensive. It includes things like key person interviews where the consultant talks to, in this case, several or to a dozen or more council members and partners and writes up a fancy report and all of that. What I'm recommending at this point, from what I do know about the financial situation, is more of a facilitated process where one, you'd hire a facilitator to walk this committee through some of this work. And there's some really smart people on the committee, the task force that have done this kind of stuff before. And so that's, I think, a feasible approach to get to where you have some new sources of money. So I'm going to see if I can do a screen share here. And really what we're going to do is we're just going to walk through that little outline that I sent. How's that? Can you see me? Can you see the
Yeah.
app? Can see it. Can you see it? Yes.
Good job.
Thank you, Christine. So none of this is rocket science. It's really, we begin by looking at what our assets are. You in this room and the people who couldn't make it are an asset. That river is an asset. The knowledge of the people and the partners are an asset. And by the way, I have to say, on the task group, you have some good partners who want to help out, find out where that intersection is with the council. Focus on really what we're doing. I read the earlier report about, we need to invent some new programs. Whether you invent new programs is up to you. But I think what you're doing right now is, worth focusing on. I mean, this is a beautiful river, and a lot of people care about it. And you're all investing your time or your agency's time, and people care about it. And then the third part of this is, I think, a communications focused plan. If we're going to start meeting with individual donors or small family foundation donors, those kinds of folks, it's really about building the identity of the council and weaving that identity into the river experience that everybody loves. So I kind of went over a little bit of this, talking about identifying the value proposition. I think we all intuit what the value is that we bring, whether that's, hey, we're all getting together and we're going to work with the Park Service as best we can. That's a value. We're representing our local governments and our states on this river, the value, but the programs too. I don't have a depth of knowledge about them, but Lori has shared some and we've talked about them. And I think that, you're doing good work, and that's the most important thing. We want to get real specific about that. And at first, that means just words, and then it gets to be where it's more about, how do we talk about this stuff? The second part is, looking at some of our existing communications. Some of this stuff's been around a long time. By the way, those of you who visit your own website will recognize all of these photos. They are wonderful. Just to take a look at what needs a refresh. What do we do that communicates real well with council members and real well with government, but not maybe to small foundations? And when I say small foundations, I mean, a family that has enough money to create a foundation, but really you're still dealing with an individual. And I think you all are working with at least one or two of those now. But just take a look. Is it time for a website refresh? Is it time to modernize the newsletter? Is it time to, just talk about things a little bit differently? It's another piece of this inventory. And then to figure out what's missing. What do we need to do a little bit different? I mean, anything, hey, we should have signs in the townships. We should do, we should be in all the visitor centers. As I said, I've been just volunteering on this. I don't know all the stuff that's going on, but just to determine, we've always wanted to do this a little bit better, or we've always wanted to, have a op-ed, or we wanted to have a member of the council write an outdoor column, and it could be a rotating thing. Not that you don't have enough things to do already, but what are our avenues for raising the profile, whether it's syndicated all around the watershed or printed materials, videos, those kinds of things. Let's figure out what we're not doing and what we feel like we need to do to raise money, right? There are a lot of things we can do to raise awareness, and I think you deserve that awareness from what I know. But we want to focus our awareness building on what's going to lead to the next step. We want to think of the ladder. We want to get people on the beginning rungs of the ladder and figure out how to move them up. So this is the case statement for those who are not familiar. Is here's why we exist. Usually it revolves around change. Here's the change we want to make in the world. That change could be as simple as not enough people care and know about this resource, and we want to change that. It could be we want our intergovernmental body to work a little closer together. It could, whatever it is, we make the case statement for it. And that statement is something that has legs, it lives a while. Maybe there's a piece of it for government grants, maybe there's a piece of it for individuals, and maybe there's a piece for foundations. But we want to lay that out. Here's who we are, here's how long we've been around, and here's what we need more resources to achieve. And this is the crux of what we're talking about. And this is the part where the committee, the task group, is really important. I've done fundraising plans where I've interviewed 20 people, board members, partners, other stakeholders, an hour a piece. So that's 20 hours. And then writing up the report, and then trying to translate that into a plan. It gets expensive. And if you're a group that's ready to make a big step and spending $25,000 or so on a fundraising plan, that's one way to go. And you probably have people in your own neighborhood who do this kind of stuff. The other way to go about it is, as I mentioned earlier, a facilitated plan. And that means relying on this task group to do the work. And that your consultant, whether that's one of you who knows how to do this stuff and has the time to do it, or a volunteer, or whether you hire somebody, it's really to be the taskmaster. Okay, here's what's next. We're going to have, we need to do these interviews. We're divvying up these interviews. We need to distill language for our case statement. Let's get this, meeting going, and we're going to do this, and we're going to spitball a bunch of words, and then we're going to, all that process, instead of having somebody do it for you and then come back and say, what do you think of this? And then they go back and do another draft. It's to facilitate the group to do that kind of work. And then in the end, we have a plan. Now, this first plan might be 3 pages. It might be 4 pages. It's probably not going to be, 30 or 40 pages. We're talking about a plan that says, here's what fits in with who we are as a group and as a council. And here are the things that maybe stretch us a little bit, but without inventing a bunch of programs that we then have to staff, what's our approach? What's our approach with individuals? What's our approach with foundations? Where are the government programs, provided they all survive, that we can still have access to? And at some point, once you've approved your plan, part of this plan is feasibility. What's it going to take to incorporate this plan? Sometimes it's a communications person who's already doing communications, and then you're just throwing something else on top of them. Sometimes it's a new position of doing these two things, and then the person is, well, I've got to get this press release or I've got to get this grant proposal out. So they're torn. So eventually, at some point, when you know what you want to raise money for and where you're going to find it and how you're going to go about doing it, somebody has to be the person administering a program, right? So the pieces of fundraising are having a program to raise money, all that back office stuff, knowing what's next, putting the letters together, getting them out the door. Part of it is more executive, that's asking people money, sitting down with them, and asking, just like we all did when we were kids. And then, another piece of it is involving the council. Traditionally, we would call it a board of directors. There's a role for everybody. That oftentimes that role is writing a thank you note. Often, or other times it might just be saying, there's a guy who lives down the street. I don't really know a lot about him. Kayak. He drives out every Saturday morning with a kayak. Let's see if I can help you make a connection. So there's something for all of us to do. And I think that's really it. I mean, if you want to do something like this, and I'm going to stop sharing, if you decide to pursue fundraising from private sources, and I would recommend that, and I'd volunteer to help with this. You're going to need some kind of RFP. So what I did is I gave you a paper that says, here's how I've approached it in the past. Here's an approach that might work for you. But to get credible proposals, you'll want to get specific. Maybe if you like this approach, it's just putting more flesh on it, and then getting more specific about deliverables. So I think if y'all decide to do this, I think your prospects are as good as anybody's. And so that's the end of my thing.
Can I follow up here? The idea that we're trying to get to here is that when you're trying to raise money, you're also in the friend-making business. You probably run into a lot of people that live in your neighborhoods that don't know what the council does. And for the success of your organization and what it's trying to accomplish, they need to understand. And you need them to be as much a part of the process as they can. And the ways you really do that are strong, effective communication and having a commitment from you on the board that, this is something that you might not really want to do, but you're going to have to do it because, your guess is as good as mine when Pennsylvania and New York might ever kick in funds. If they haven't for the last 37 years, I think that doesn't inspire confidence in anything happening. So you're going to need to find some other ways. You would like to be in a position where you could fully staff the organization the way it was meant to be back in 1988 when this plan came together, that you'd have a second project review person and a information specialist, this communication person. The position Laurie was originally hired for before she transitioned over to do both. It's hard to do both because executive directors have to be talking to people a lot. They have to be out there building support for the organization and providing leadership. And somebody's got to be preparing that material, formulating the plan, getting it out there, and making sure it gets printed or published or posted on the website, whatever it might be. You'd like to see that happen. I think that's where the organization grows to what the full initial intent was. This doesn't mean that you don't continue your primary focuses of keeping the National Park Service in check and in protecting property owner rights and protecting the independence and functionality of your local towns and townships. You've been doing that for 37 years, and by all accounts and by every measure, you've succeeded at that. But there's still this other part where we need people who visit the corridor, who live in the corridor, who have property in the corridor, who don't live there, to be your own versions of Friends of the Upper Delaware or Friends of the Upper Delaware Council. So you need to build your base to some degree in order to accomplish all those things that you want to accomplish. And that's, as David said, is 90% perspiration. This has been done before in hundreds of thousands of other locations and in, everything from supporting the garden club to the volunteer fire department to the community center to your local fishing club to the hunting organization you may belong to giving money to those, the Shriners Hospital or the place in Memphis, whatever that hospital is, the Danny Thomas place, or giving money to your church. Those are all ways that you are already involved in raising money. If you do it ethically and legally and transparently, if you ask for it honestly, use it responsibly and report responsibly and how you've spent it and the progress you've made with those funds, you can do this. People do it every day all over this country.
And Chuck, I'd just like to add, and see, first, and before we see if there are any questions, that the key to the plan is making it realistic. I mean, if your $300,000 a year is going to continue, it might say, hey, how do we raise another 25, another 50? The plan might begin with, we're going to raise 10 next year, and then it might be 45. I'm not saying that there aren't the possibility of some big wins, but there's a reality check in here. By the way, I love I like the protecting property rights since 1988. That's a good one. I think that's a winner. But anyway, Chuck, we should probably pause, see if there are any questions, and because these guys have a full agenda tonight.
All right, thank you. Do we have anybody who wants to ask Jeff or Dave any questions and direct them? I do like that motto. That sounded catchy. Protecting property rights, 1988. That sounded kind of catchy.
That's what we do.
Anybody has any questions? What's that?
I said, that's what we do. So, yeah. Well, thanks. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you. And if I'll be in touch with Lori and the committee, the task group, and let me know if I can help in any way.
All right,
I've got
thank you very
another
much.
meeting to go to, so I'm going to sign off. If we're
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Good to meet you.
Thanks. Okay, so moving on to the next agenda item. Approval of the September 4th meeting minutes. I have a motion to approve minutes from this previous council meeting. Al? Have a second?
I'll second them.
Jenny second, all in favor?